Hey folks, thanks for watching today. I mentioned at the end of the video yesterday that Eric would be joining you all today. I made a mistake. That's going to be tomorrow as he wraps up some travel here this morning. Nonetheless, looking down at the radar coverage here this morning across the continental U.S., still relatively quiet. I think this week seeing some showers and storms percolate in western Kansas. That's kind of moving through western Oklahoma, panhandle of Texas now. Those have been weakening overnight. You can see they were a bit stronger yesterday evening. In the afternoon hours, saw some hail and wind reports along the state line here, Colorado, far western Kansas. Laid down a little outflow boundary overnight, but again, that activity, see it as it pushes south and east here this morning, expected to weaken further. Some showers and storms lingering over Florida. We saw those yesterday. And then over the western U.S., not a ton of widespread shower activity, but you can see some of it here in the morning hours. But do you notice these returns are kind of moving in that direction here? And that's indicative of this broader trough that's spinning kind of centered over San Francisco, bringing some moisture, bringing some disturbed weather to the Intermountain West, Montana. As we go through the next 48 hours, we'll look at that. And it's really this trough that's going to be one of our bigger weather makers kind of over the next 3 to 5 days, which we discussed yesterday. I will say, as this kind of loop was just looping back and playing over and over again this morning, my eyes were kind of drawn up here to let's say northeast or central Minnesota, northwest Wisconsin. Do you see these very light returns here? Those aren't rain. This is actually fog being picked up by the radar here. And I went to kind of confirm this. We have a satellite product which does a pretty decent job about picking up that nighttime fog, which is hard to see on infrared or radar sometimes. And it shows up in this kind of white, these milky returns here. And it's doing a great job capturing this fog that's developed in the early morning. When we reach those lowest temperatures is often when we've had, the most runtime of no sun late into the night right before sunrise. And so you can see just as we kind of reached 4, 5, and 6 a.m., this fog really gets more widespread across central Minnesota. And if you look closely, northern South Dakota here, 5 a.m., there's this fog bomb. I don't know how else to call it, but those temperatures finally reach that condensation level, and then fog just explodes across South Dakota, even spreading up the river valleys into North Dakota here. Just really neat to see that. Clearly we reached that temperature with which we saturated the air mass, and bang, got condensation and fog. Just neat to see that kind of widespread fog here. We can confirm this just by jumping over and looking at surface observations. And look at Minnesota, widespread fog observations, northwest Wisconsin, much of South Dakota, even getting into portions of Nebraska, northwest Iowa here this morning. NOAA very nicely put out this fog advisory here across much of Minnesota, portions of South Dakota, northwest Iowa, northwest Wisconsin, lining up, almost exactly with where we just saw those fog observations. If we look elsewhere across the country, you can see central and eastern Oregon, flood watches here. We see that trough spinning, some of the shower activity expected to continue here today. If we jump back big picture and look at the jet stream flow over North America, we'll see what's responsible. There's that trough spinning over San Francisco, bringing that moisture up into the Intermountain West. Talked about those flood watches. Montana expected to get improved precipitation over the next few days. This is also out ahead of this trough, warming up our air mass in the central and eastern U.S., which over the last kind of 14 to 21 days has been cooler for many of these areas. So if we look at those daytime high temperatures today rather than the lows, this is Wednesday, September 10th. Underneath the influence of that trough, increasing cloud cover, cooler temperatures across California, Nevada, Oregon. We saw those flood watches warmer now along the Continental Divide in areas just to the east. That activity increases tomorrow on Thursday, now getting up into the mid to high 80s, if not 90s, across a wide area across the central part of the country. Continue even more so on Friday, now well into the 90s for Missouri, portions of Iowa, Illinois on Saturday. By this weekend, look at the warmth all the way up through Minnesota, up the Missouri River Valley into the Dakotas. Sioux Falls maybe cracking 90 on Saturday, and then Sunday just continuing to pump over the Midwest. By Monday, this warmth now starting to push all the way over toward the Atlantic coast. See that more so on Tuesday. That takes us all the way out, and that trough still spinning somewhere here over the Four Corners or Intermountain West. This takes us all the way almost a week out, and that trough still kind of lingering as it kind of exits up into Canada here. I'm just going to quickly show this, because of the jet stream level flow. If I jump back and show you that it's really more so, well up here into Canada, we just have this little cutoff trough that we're seeing move very slowly. When they're cut off from the main jet stream level flow, they often move slowly like that. So it's not a surprise to kind of see that in the temperature pattern here. But I just wanted to visualize how much warmer we're getting. And so if we jump over and look at the ECMWF ensemble, this is the probability from all the different members that's been run out for the next 15 days of any geography reaching below 32 degrees Fahrenheit in that minimum temperature. And if I play this forward, other than the Sierra Nevadas and some of the higher elevations in the Rockies, here this weekend, maybe like Sand River Mountains, central Idaho, like, the mountains of Yellowstone. I don't see much in the way of frost chance. Maybe for, again, some of the higher elevations here on the Montana, Idaho, Wyoming border. But I'm taking this, all the way out to like September 25th, and very little frost chance across much of the continental U.S. Not much of a frost chance across, the southern half of Canada. It's just kind of an impressive warm air mass that's settling in. We'll look at this more closely and kind of the reasons for that near the end of the video. I did want to jump over and look at that 3 kilometer an AM forecast. Make this valid here about 6, 7 a.m. this morning, capturing those showers and storms in Oklahoma, western Kansas, the weak showers that we saw earlier over southern Wisconsin. Play this forecast through this afternoon, 6, 7 p.m. Central Time. More afternoon over in the west. You can see some of that activity now. Showers and storms increasing over the Snake River Valley, Treasure Valley, eastern Oregon, up into the central part of the state, prompting those flood watches there. Some showers and storms over. You can see central Utah and Nevada. If I play that forward into the overnight and then into Thursday. Now Thursday lunchtime, you can see some of that activity increasing over central Montana, maybe northern North Dakota here, some stronger storms there. But not really till Thursday evening do we see more widespread shower and storm coverage over Montana, Wyoming, portions of northeast Colorado. Again, spotty in nature. It's not going to be this kind of widespread high rain event. But underneath some of these storms and stronger showers, you're going to get better rain totals, obviously. And then taking this into the Friday around lunchtime, you can see that activity now has shifted. Where at the beginning of the forecast it was here. Now we're kind of shifting it more so over the high plains where we see that spotty coverage increase. If we look at the SPC outlook over the next 3 days, not much to write home about. We do see that Thursday afternoon. We talked about maybe North Dakota, eastern Montana, some of those stronger storms trying to prompt a marginal risk here, but not looking at a widespread severe event from this upper level trough. The excessive rainfall outlook below that, maybe getting out into, like Friday near the Four Corners region, seeing some stronger rain totals there in southern Colorado, northern New Mexico, prompting the slight risk for excessive rainfall. But again, not seeing, widespread significant rain or severe weather when we kind of pan out left to right on the 3 panels there. If we just total up that 3 kilometer an AM precipitation, you can see over central Oregon, some higher amounts here, spotty but high amounts here in portions of Montana. Over the next 72 hours or so over the Colorado Rockies. Whether the exact storm is going to form like the NAM is unclear over North Dakota. But again, the potential for some of the spotty shower and storm coverage, is going to increase the chance that some counties here luck out and get quite a bit of precipitation out of this pattern here. But it's not going to be widespread. You can see a number of counties in here missing out on some appreciable precipitation. Do you want to jump over and look at the ECMWF forecast? I'm going to make this valid like this afternoon, where you can see some of that coverage increasing over California, central Oregon. If we take this in through tomorrow, you can see that activity shifting a little bit to the north over Idaho, eastern Oregon, portions of Montana, getting into North Dakota. There's that stronger precipitation signal a little bit further to the southwest than we saw it from the NAM. That's Thursday evening, where they had that marginal risk out in kind of this corridor here. Let's play this forward. We'll go into Friday afternoon. It was Friday 7 p.m. Coverage more so over the high plains. Maybe something of the system trying to sneak back up and over this ridge here. You can see this trying to get into Michigan on Saturday as coverage increases across the western Dakotas, eastern Montana through Saturday afternoon. Better coverage along the high plains, the wheat belt here now, western Nebraska, western Dakotas, eastern Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, even now getting down into northwest Texas, eastern New Mexico. That system we talked about kind of sneaking through the Midwest, can see Michigan, Ontario, a high production region in here, Windsor, toward Lebanon, and then here across Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York. That system now moving through on Sunday. This is an area that's been just as dry as anywhere else that we've talked about. It's kind of rooting for the system to get up and over while this low continues to spin here over the plains. This is all the way out on Sunday. See that coverage now pushing to the east along the Missouri River through the Dakotas, now in the eastern Dakotas, eastern Nebraska, western Iowa. But the precipitation coverage expected to decrease through the forecast period. So getting a little bit weaker as it moves west to east here. And then maybe something moving through Missouri, eastern Missouri, southern Illinois. I'm a little bit skeptical of this right now just because of how dry we've been, but it is there on the forecast. We've seen it over the last few days. Some precipitation trying to sneak in here. Probably not going to be as widespread in this corridor as it is here, where we see those better totals getting into Pennsylvania and New York and ultimately New England, especially if we can get a low to spin up here over that area early next week. If I take this forecast a little bit forward, Tuesday into Wednesday, we do see a weak troughs trying to sneak through the center part of the country. You'll see precipitation chances pick back up Wednesday and Thursday across the plains, but not, strong confidence that that's going to be racing a low all the way through the Midwest, bringing widespread rainfall to this quarter here late next week. There's some chances for it. You can see some of this trying to get back into the Mississippi River Valley, but I'm playing this backwards like Monday and Tuesday. And you just don't see widespread coverage in this corridor here. If we jump over and look at those precip anomalies, if we look at the 5-day, best coverage in this initial corridor that we talked about. By 7 days, not much of a change in that as that trough spins back up into Canada. Areas of Saskatchewan, southwest Manitoba. 4 to 10 days, can see some of this, right, trying to get into some of these areas here, but better coverage across portions of New England. If we go all the way out 10 days, see still how dry we are in this quarter here, save for just some spotty amounts. New England, Indiana, portions of Missouri, but still relatively dry across the Midwest and the Southeast. I think part of the reason for this is just kind of a general lack of flow. We started the video, looking at that jet stream flow, and much of it's well up here, up into Canada, with these little cutoff lows below it. And these can bring a lot of rain to, localized areas. We talked about that, over the next 48 hours, but by and large, leaving, wider swaths of the country, pining for precipitation. So as I take this forecast forward, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, see this ridge developing across central Canada. There's that weak trough now meandering through the Four Corners. Talked about maybe, Friday into Saturday, some heavier rain risk underneath that. Then it swings up into Nebraska, the Central Plains by Monday, bringing those precipitation chances further along the Missouri River. There's that system sneaking through New England, bringing better precipitation amounts there. But by Tuesday, that trough weakening now over North Dakota. We have another one behind it, maybe over Idaho. That tries to swing through, but look at how weak that is. Not even showing up as a well-defined trough at this point, Wednesday of Thursday and next week. And that's why, while we did see precipitation chances pick back up in this corridor here, maybe more so over the Missouri River, it wasn't this widespread, precip making low that's going to barrel through here, bringing widespread, severe chances through mid-September. If anything, by the end of this forecast run, man, there's this broad ridge up over Canada, these tiny little cutoffs underneath it. It's a pattern that's almost indicative of like last spring when we had low momentum, just generally in the atmosphere across the globe. And if we look over at that total angular momentum chart, we can see that at least initially a little bit higher, but it just continues to fall. And at least from this forecast here, run from today, lower all the way through the early part of October. It just kind of, again, reminds me of last spring. I went back and looked, you got like April 30th of 2025. And again, that jet stream well up here into Canada, these little cutoff lows sneaking underneath this. These brought at times a lot of rain to the southeast, the southern plains, but left other areas of the country fairly dry. Just these spotty rainfall amounts, these slow-moving troughs sneaking through underneath the flow as further north into Canada. Another way we can kind of visualize this, if we just look at convection or ascent in the western Pacific, that's often, and we talk about that's an area where the atmosphere it breathes, it inhales and exhales. And right now it's been exhaling and putting momentum back into the atmosphere through the end of August, beginning of September, perhaps, some influence on this cold weather that we've seen recently at the end of the month and the beginning of September here. But you notice as we go through the next few days, that kind of exhaling stops and it goes back almost more into this like inhale regime where we have less momentum. So with less convection in the West Pacific near Indonesia, we tend to have, weaker jet stream level flow over North America like we're seeing in the forecast. Now, this is partially related to this Kelvin wave. We've talked about this. That's racing through the Pacific, heading over toward the Atlantic where it might help stir up some development. It's kind of the corridor, the geography I'm drawing there, more so the Atlantic. But over in the West Pacific, expecting a reduction in that momentum. We saw this on this chart. It's just a different way to kind of visualize that. And we can even just see this in the jet stream level flow. I'm focused here, this region here. When there's a lot of convection here, we strengthen the jet stream, and that produces troughs, ridges, big low pressure systems through North America, kind of off the screen on the other side of the globe there. But you'll notice right now, it's decent momentum, decent flow in that jet stream, racing through. But I'm going to play this forecast out. This is today. But let's take it to like 5 days, like 5 days in the future. Let's go to the 14th, which is next Sunday. And you see it starting to break down a bit? These little wobbles in the jet stream flow. It's starting to weaken. There's even a little one showing up here in the southern hemisphere. So as we start to lose that momentum, we come over to North America. We can see, look at the lack of flow across the continental U.S. just without that strong extended Pacific jet, racing through the East Pacific. Less coherent flow, these kind of weak cutoff troughs, and again, not a lot of precipitation to talk about for much of the eastern, kind of at least third of the country. And then finally, just looking at that jet stream flow, looking from the ECMWF, 250 millibars, made this valid here as of Wednesday around lunchtime. Again, starting out decent flow, at least over the Western Pacific. But as I play the forecast forward, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, look at the weakness in the jet stream. So by the time it's over North America, it's all the way up over the northern territories or like Yukon. And that continues through the 16th, 17th. Look at the flow. All the way up here. That's why we have virtually no frost chances over the next kind of 10 to 15 days here. Until we get further out into the forecast, like the 22nd, 23rd, I don't know how much of this we can believe, but at least some of that flow returns. Notice that we get something of a trough here. And maybe, you get further out like the 25th. Okay, now we have a trough coming into the continental U.S. We have a low coming across the Rockies. I'm not saying this is the forecast. This is all the way out. We're 15 days out at this point. But at least that's a regime that would give us a little bit something more to talk about, in the morning videos with, maybe more severe chances, potential frost chance, etc. near the end of the month if this forecast holds true. If you look at the three panels for temperature going out 5, 10, and then 15 days, again, left to right, at least out through next week, you can see the widespread warmth across Canada, the Midwest, kind of the central part of the country, and those very few frost chances. In fact, where we have at least like seasonal temperatures is where we're seeing some of that precip, right, early next week. If we go further out into the forecast, 10 to 15 days, this at least takes us out through the 25th, maybe more of a signature for something of a low pressure system, again, trying to come off the Rockies, bring precip back to the wheat belt, the central or high plains. You can see that just in those cooler temperatures, extending all the way up at times in some of these models up into the Canadian prairie. Still warmer in the east, but at least this is something of a renewed chance for a trough to move through the middle part of the country. So if we look at those long range, flip back. If we look at those long range precipitation forecasts, the 8 to 14 days, there's a lot of uncertainty in these. The ECMWF ensemble, right, central plains up into the prairie, better precipitation chances there, even getting some of these over into the Midwest, like Iowa and Northwest Missouri. AIFS, it actually has much of that area dry, has more of the upper Midwest wet, as this corridor dry similarly in both forecasts, all the way out through the 8 to 14 days. And then the GFS ensemble, weaker with some of the precipitation returns over the central and northern plains, more so over the high plains, even into the southwest. Now, there is agreement between all three of these, and that is on something coming out of the East Pacific. This would be potential Tropical Storm Mario, which we're watching maybe developing in the Eastern Pacific. I'll talk about that in a moment. If that comes further northwest and then spins back into the southwest, we'd see precipitation chances increase, maybe for Southern California, at least into the lower Colorado River Valley, Arizona. You can see that in some of these forecasts here. The Climate Prediction Center highlighting this wider corridor here for above average chances for rain. But unfortunately, decent agreement for kind of this area here. Again, the Ohio River Valley, that next 8 to 14 days, looking at those drier conditions. And considering that harvest is starting to pick up in this corridor, we're starting to lose soil moisture, crops are drying down very quickly. The risk for harvest field fires is increasing very rapidly across this area. The only good news is that we haven't seen a lot of wind in this area, which would exacerbate that to a large degree, certainly for fire weather. But please be careful out in the fields here over the next kind of 15 to 30 days until we get some rainfall. If we do jump over and look in the Eastern Pacific, just at that satellite imagery, looking for like a coherent storm here, any low-level spin, not quite seeing it, but there is plenty of thunderstorm activity here. You can actually see an upper-level ridge kind of spinning here. Do you see that clockwise flow west of the Mexican coastline there? But it's this area that's caught the eye of the National Hurricane Center as these tropical storms kind of bubble up here, these tropical thunderstorms, I should say. And that has been given a 90% chance of formation over the next 7 days. If we believe some of the forecast models, it's potentially going to develop pretty quickly as it moves northwest here over the next 2 days. We are watching the remnants of Kiko, still a tropical storm, but lacking any kind of coherent thunderstorms around it right now. In fact, if we jump over and look at infrared, see those low clouds spinning here, this naked system as we call it. I still need to see that inertia spinning around north of Maui here. Bringing some rip currents and swells here to the northern coast, obviously, but no precipitation, or really high winds impacting the islands right now, fortunately, as that storm weakened and went to the north. If we jump over and look at the ECMWF forecast, This is looking at that low-level spin in the atmosphere. It's actually started at 24 hours out, but I'm going to bring it back to about the recording of this video. It actually has something of a center of a spin here underneath some of those tropical thunderstorms. As they played this forward, it ends up developing pretty quickly into a storm within the next 48 hours, just off the Mexican coastline. That tracks to the west and northwest before strengthening further, likely into a hurricane, at least here from the ECMWF. To get out through the weekend, now into early next week, Tuesday, Wednesday. I'm taking this forecast quickly. Weakens as it hits the cold water. We know that cold water usually begins in kind of a line here off the Baja. So that storm predictably weakens, but able to pick up quite a bit of moisture on its way northwest before spinning maybe into Southern California or the lower Colorado River Valley. In fact, if I jump over, let's see if I can pull up that precipitable water, looking at that measure of moisture in the atmosphere. So play this forward, and you can see it spinning up, strengthening to like a 980, 970, maybe a weak hurricane at this point before weakening. But a lot of moisture now pulled up into this area from the eastern Pacific, and you can see it kind of plume up into the southwest, where it would likely bring another chance for rainfall, monsoon-like thunderstorms to that corridor here, maybe even like the Southern California coastline. We'll have to see. That is kind of right in line with this Kelvin wave. We've talked about this ascent moving west to east. This is the out in the forecast. This black line is present day. Here we are on the 10th, and that Kelvin wave moving through the Pacific quickly to the point by early next week, like the 15th. It's right over the eastern Pacific, where we saw potential storm Mario develop. And the end of the week, even getting out into that next week, moving over in the Atlantic, where we might have to watch conditions more conducive for tropical development overspread the Atlantic. It's been really quiet over the last kind of 10 to 20 days, even since like Hurricane Aaron in the first half of August. But if we do look out late into next week, the ECMWF ensemble at least has some sort of wave coming off Africa. It's all the way out Wednesday, September 17th. So we can't put a lot of confidence in this yet, but there is something to keep an eye on as that Kelvin wave spreads over Atlantic, renews some ascent over this region, perhaps making it a little bit more favorable for tropical development. Again, too far out to talk about any specifics with that system, but it's on my radar, at least for now. Where we haven't seen a system develop is over here in the Bay of Campeche. We talked about the potential with some of the thunderstorm activity forecasts from these long-range extended models. This from the ECMWF extended from the September 16th out through October 16th of greater than average rainfall in this quarter here. So we're still watching this area for potential development through the end of September, early October. Haven't seen it yet. I will say one thing I'm keeping an eye on, at least kind of closer to home, and this is really only from the GFS right now. If I take their forecast forward through this weekend, there is a bit of spin down here in Central America this weekend. Now, really, the GFS has been the only model that's highlighted this, but if you look closely, we have the trade winds coming east to west through the southern Caribbean. We have some winds moving west to east here, and that's allowing some spin, this kind of Central American gyre that we can see develop in September sometimes. And these can sometimes produce storms a little bit closer to home, at least with reference to the continental U.S., and you'll see by next Wednesday, GFS tries to spin something up here in the western Caribbean, crosses the Yucatan, where by late next week, it's got a, something to, at least something near hurricane strength in the Gulf. Now, this isn't, a strong, confident forecast right now. It's just one model run, the GFS, which hasn't performed very well this year, but it is something to keep on the radar. If we jump over and look at the ECMWF, over that same time period, it spins that storm up that we were talking about initially, but nothing in the Gulf. If we look at the AIFS, has that same system here, north of the Lesser Antilles, but nothing here in the Gulf at that same time period on Friday. So again, just one model run, but it's something to keep an eye on. To kind of wrap up here today, looking at the 8 to 14 day outlook from the Climate Prediction Center. With that jet stream level flow well up into Canada, it's allowed warmth to overspread much of the continental U.S. That is indicative of that lack of frost risk, at least through that third week of September. We'll see where we go after that. I talked yesterday about perhaps some favorable MJO activity helping to bring cooler temperatures or troughing back to the central or eastern part of the country as we get into early October. That's still well out into the forecast right now, but it is something to keep an eye on. As far as precipitation goes, this is that corridor. We looked at this earlier in the 8 to 14 day precip panel from the different models, where we might be having something of a trough get back into the Four Corners region later into next week, bringing renewed precipitation back to the winter wheat belt kind of right during the planting season, and then through the southwest with potential Mario, bringing moisture. If that storm is a little bit stronger and crosses more quickly across some of the higher elevation here, perhaps trying to get some precipitation into the southern plains where, maybe it would help get up into a low to bring precip back to the Midwest. But by and large, this area over the next 10 to 15 days, still worried about drought expansion here. We did see in the next 7 days, New England, Pennsylvania, some better precipitation chances, not widespread high amounts, but at least something versus the dry stretch that we've been through. And then the southeast, above average precip predicted the 17th through the 23rd. I'll leave it there today, and then this time I'm pretty confident that Eric will talk with you all on Thursday morning. Thanks for watching.